Hey guys, Philosopher here, and today I have my new Web Warriors infographic. I am excited to get this one out pretty early. I know a lot of you have been asking me for it, and I think this time I usually try to take quite a bit of time to play the team beforehand before I release this, and I feel like because I tested it on the test server and got through sort of the initial kinks there, and I've tested the full team on live for some weeks now. I feel pretty confident about this team, gotten some input from others. And so let's just walk right through now what my recommendations are regarding the team. And I have to say, this is a good team and a team I know a lot of you are building because they're so good at bio raids. Obviously, they're more of a specialist team, not quite as strong in other game modes, but still a very strong team that I'm sure people are going to be investing in for quite some time. The infographic is linked below. You can always find all of my infographics on my Discord, which is also linked below. But let's get right to the beginning. So there are a series of, so we're going to go through, by the way, today, T4, ISOs, positioning, gear, priority, everything. All right, so let's start with the passives that are really important here. One of them in particular is Spider-Man's passive. You see that right there is the number one T4 on the essential list. And that's really important because if you look here, whenever the Web Warriors dodge, Spidey is going to be filling the speed bar of that character by 10%. That is absolutely huge. That's where the turn meter really comes from this team that gets them going. They dodge a whole lot. They get a lot of evades. And this game is all about taking turns faster and more than your opponent. When your team takes turns, it not only gives you more damage and so forth, but it also, because you're taking more attacks, but it also gives you the chance to take advantage of the situation. So, for example, if your character is close to dying and you take extra turns, you can heal up. If your character is close to dying and the other side takes a turn, of course, they can kill your character. And then, of course, this also provides a little bit of dodge chance and speed to Spidey, but that's not really what's getting the work done here on this T4. This is all about that speed bar. All right. Now the next one on the list, the second one on the essential T4 list is the Spider-Punk passive. Now, I have to say these top few are pretty close, and I could see arguments for, putting these in a different order. I feel pretty strongly about Spidey's passive being number one. Punk and Scarlet's passive, you could argue about which way they should be, but I think this is the right order. First of all, this gives 10% dodge chance and crit chance to him, but it also gives crit chance to the entire team. I think you should run this team primarily as a Raider team. We'll talk more about that later, but if that's the case, then essentially it just means that they're all going to get a lot of crit damage. They get crit damage from another passive we're going to look at in a second, but also they're going to get crit damage from the Raider ISO. So if you had a different ISO setup, this wouldn't be as important. But this is really a team that gets so much damage from the Raider ISO. So that's my recommendation here. And getting the additional crit chance, I think, is very helpful for this team. I will say that, as I said a minute ago, the Scarlet Spider passive, also very good. You could really have these ranked, I think, in any order. And this one is excellent because it gives 15% max health to the team and 15% dodge chance to him. I just think that max health is really nice, but it's not as essential as on some teams. I mean, look, the health on these characters isn't super high. I do think this is really important, and I have it in the top 3 essentials because you want to prevent your Web Warriors from getting one shot, and sometimes what happens is if the RNG is bad and they don't dodge, that happens. So this prevents that from happening. So even though the health isn't quite as essential as some teams, I think this is really helpful for this team, really important. I really would not run this team without any of these top 3 passives. They're all super important. And similarly, the next couple passives are the next couple T4 abilities I also regard as essential. And if you look here, they're both on Ghost Spider here. Actually, the next 3 are all on Ghost Spider. Passive, ultimate, and basic. So let's just go right to those. Why do I love Ghost Spider's kit so much and these T4s so much? So to me, she's probably the most important character in the team. So first of all, I absolutely love this out of turn damage. So if you see here, when an enemy attacks a web warrior ally, attack that enemy for 250% damage. So why is out of turn damage so helpful? And this is, by the way, an additional 100% damage. So it goes from 150 to 250, which is huge. What I think is, out of turn damage is so important. You've seen, I'm sure some of you have experienced this already with like characters like Kestrel and Black Bolt, because what it does is it essentially allows that character to cut in line. In other words, every character is waiting for their turn to come. That's why turn meter is so important and gaining speed bar. But what essentially she does is cut in line. When it's not her turn, she does damage anyway. That's really powerful, okay? And so having a big Ghost Spider and having this passive really adds a lot of damage to your team. And that's important because for a team like this, they don't have a cleanse. They don't have tons of health. The way that they win this is, certainly there's debuffs that they put out. They have buffs, but they take a lot of turns. They dodge a whole lot, and they put out a lot of damage in part because of this ability. So I think this is really important. Now let's take a look at the next one. The fifth essential T4 in my mind is her ultimate. This is such a powerful ability. It really makes her a strong standalone character on a lot of teams. For example, if you're building just one character, I think throwing her in on the symbiotes instead of Venom makes that team a lot better because of this ability. It's like Hela, except you spread with the T4 all negative effects instead of 3. Very, very powerful. So just like the Hela ultimate that spreads debuffs, spreading all the debuffs with this ability is just super powerful. Now, obviously, it's a long cooldown, but this is, I think, one of those abilities that is so impactful when it's used that it is worth upgrading and is an essential upgrade for this team, even though it's got that long cooldown. All right, and now let's go to the sixth ability on my list is the Ghost Basic. And why is this so important? Well, this is one that I don't think you really see the value of until you use the team quite a bit. Remember this team does not spread or extend things like ability block or trauma, some of the best debuffs. Blind is perhaps the best one that gets spread around, and the best debuff that can be extended or spread around. And so getting this blind is absolutely huge. And blind is a 100% defense, essentially. Unless the enemy's using an unavoidable attack, they're going to miss. And not only is that going to be just such an awesome debuff to have, one of those powerful debuffs of the game, which of course can get spread by all these abilities that we'll see in the moment on the team, or extended. But also, because it causes your web warriors to evade, you get all those bonuses like the turn meter we saw a minute ago, speed up and so forth that you get from Miles. You get the speed up from Miles passive and so on. So I think that's just a very, very, very impactful basic. And you don't get that at all. You don't get that at all if you don't have the T4. Now, I know some of you are going to say, well, wait, Philosopher, that's only in raids. But like I said in the very beginning, I really view this as very much a raid team. I mean, not only is that just the kit that's here, but some of the other raid teams we've had lately, like New Warriors, were much more OP everywhere. Like you brought in your Cloak Dagger Death Pool and you were just erasing people with those ultimates. This is not that kind of team. It's okay-ish elsewhere. It's just it's just all right in other game modes, but it's really good in raids. So this is in my mind, a team that you put T4s on primarily based on how they do in raid, and that's how I evaluated them. All right, so now let's go to the next essential T4 on my list, and that is a Spidey special. And I really debated about whether this one is essential or just good to have. I think you can make an argument either way, but I think it's just so impactful and really the most important ability that Spidey has. So I like it. I mean, it keeps him alive quite a bit because you go from, instead of a 50% drain, it goes to 100% drain, which I really think helps in terms of healing quite a bit. Drain is where you get healed for the amount of damage that you do. And then a chaining from 5 targets instead of 3 to 4 is actually a pretty big damage increase. So if you do, for example, in Rage, you're going to have a lot of enemies clumped together usually. So if you go to three targets, you're essentially getting, not quite a 200% damage increase, but you're going from, let's say, 300 damage to 500 damage, right? That's very significant. That's 67%, 66.6% damage increase here just through the chaining, assuming there are 5 additional targets. It's not a rebound chain, so unlike the Weapon X team, they actually have to have 5 targets that can all chain together. But so it's somewhat theoretical, but I think that overall, getting that additional drain and that healing is very nice for this character, getting the additional adjacents. I really think that this is one of the ones. It's hard for me to see that you're going to run this team in raids and you're not going to do this one. So I put it in essential, but there certainly could be an argument for this one to go into the nice to haves. All right, now let's get into our nice to haves. And, this is one I also debated putting in essential. So these lines are a little bit fuzzy here, and that is the Miles Ultimate. And I will tell you, Miles Ultimate, it hits like a truck. I mean, I have this team right now. If you look at my team, I only have Miles at Gear Tier 14, level 80. And I have no problems beating the nodes in Doom 2.3. And this is one reason why. I mean, this ability just hits super, super hard with him at 5 red stars, 7 yellows. And he's very easy to get to 7 yellows. Super farmable. What I like about this one is if you don't have the T4, you get disrupted on one target and then one additional, up to one additional. You get disrupted to the target of your choice and one additional. This not only does 30% damage to everybody. Okay, so everybody on the board, there could be 10 enemies, okay, because it's raiding. But disrupted to 3 additional targets, so you get 4 enemies disrupted. And that's a pretty powerful debuff, and it's also one of the better debuffs that can be spread by this team. In other words, they're not going to be spreading ability block or stun or whatever, but if they can spread disrupted, not quite as good, but it's definitely an important debuff that you'd like to have them spread around. So I like this one. I really debated putting it as essential. All right, now let's go to the next T4 on this list, and that is the Spider Punk Ultimate. And I'll tell you, this is a real fantastic one as well. Look, the reason this one is so good, now this is all just nice to have because it does apply the trauma regardless of whether you have this T4. So this would certainly be essential if you needed it for the trauma, but the trauma comes very early on. So what this says is he gains evade, which is nice, right? Evade, 100% damage reduction, and it, obviously in this team, all the evades and dodges feed turn meter and other things to the team. But 40% damage to all enemies is great. You're often going to be fighting 6, 7, 8, 10 enemies, that sort of thing, and so 40% damage to all, I think, means a lot in that context. So very, very nice to have. Very impactful from that perspective. And like I said, the evade, very nice for this ability as well. All right. Now let's go to the next nice to have. That is the Scarlet Spider Ultimate. I think, Scarlet Spider, very important part of this team. And this is one that I really moved up after talking to people about it and getting feedback. This is one I originally wasn't sure about because it's obviously just damage. But, when I've talked this through with other folks who've been running this team a lot in Doom 2.3, and as they pointed out, it says 60% damage on all attacks. First of all, so 60% for, it's essentially additional 120% on one target. And then an additional 60% for all the rest. There's usually a lot in raids. And this particular attack hits like a truck. And so, it's just very, very nice to have. I mean, you want to have the damage output nice enough so that you kill the enemy before they have a chance to whittle down your web warriors. And so you don't have to worry about timing out and so on. And so, these are the key abilities that take the team from essential, like getting it operational. That's those essential ones, making sure your web warriors can stay alive and function, to these nice to have ones, which take the team to one that, can perform much better. And that's really what this does. All right, now let's go to the next nice to have on this list. And that is the Spider Punk Special. Okay. Spider Punk Special. And what is so great about the Spider Punk special, this is one that really can do a lot of damage in raid. So it's okay, plus 30% damage to 5 adjacent targets. But then, you have, in addition to that, plus 40 damage per Web Warrior ally. So if you're not running the full team, obviously this one is not so valuable if you're just throwing Spider Punk in solo. But I think he's, fairly expendable. There's some high-end players that actually are using Symbiote Spider-Man instead of Spider Punk because they like his extend. They like the additional stun on the boss node. I'm not doing that. I think the full team is better together. But my point is, if you're this T4 only makes sense if you're running the full team. But if you are, you get additional 70% per target. And so 70% to 5 targets is a lot of damage. This is another one that's just you get the damage from it. Okay? All right. Now let's go to the next nice to have. And that is the Ghost Special. Now, this is the least useful one that she has, but look, it's still very good. It's nice to have. Why? Because you go from chaining to 3 to 4 additional targets to 4 to 5. Anytime you get additional adjacent, you have additional targets on an attack. That's nice because it essentially you get this full damage. Once again, you get 160% damage. So it's really like an additional 160% damage, potentially 320 if if it went from 3 to 5 hypothetically. But certainly this is on average 3.5. This is 4.5. So it's really an extra 160% damage plus 20% damage to all. And so that adds up to just a lot of extra damage. That's the bottom line. Okay. So that's why it's a nice to have. Next one on the list is the Miles passive. Now, let's talk a little bit about about Miles. Probably the least important in terms of T4s. I put a bunch of T4s on him. Just experiment and just guys so you see. I mean, I get a lot of T4s, particularly because we do well in the raid season. If you look at the top of the raid season, you just get a lot of T4s. So I'm able to experiment with these, and that's why I like to wait to put these out. So I think I didn't put all these all that highly. The only one that I put here so that's clearly in the nice to have category is this one. But I've had a lot of people say to me that they are not sure about it because you do get offense up elsewhere. I did like it. I did like it. To make sure you got offense up. Even if you might get offense up from another source. But I think this is getting close to the ones that you could just leave off. Okay, I still think it's nice to have. But because he's getting offense up every single turn and it's pretty reliable if the target has defense down. But I think it's conditional, so it's very low. I mean, that's why we're looking very low on this list, okay? So if you're, let's say, a free-to-play player, your T4s are pretty light, you can feel happy sort of cutting off somewhere in this 10, 11, 12 range. This is where they start getting more and more speculative here. I would say speculative, but much more like less of a return. These I still think are worth doing. If you're somebody who has a lot of T4s, the passive is worth doing, but I think it's more sketch. Okay, less return on your investment, so to speak. The basic I have is the next one, and I haven't even done that one yet, but it's simply because this is the only striker on the team. So it just means more damage on your ISO attacks. I really should do, I'm actually just going to do this one while we're recording the video because I think why not? I mean, he's your striker, the only striker on the team. So this will make the ISO attack hit harder. Now, we'll get to that in a minute. We'll get to the ISO setup in a minute, but that's the logic there. If you were running some other ISO setup and he was Raider or something, then obviously you'd have a different positioning on this T4 would be one you wouldn't get, but I would actually I would recommend highly that he is a striker in this team. All right, now let's go to the ones that I don't recommend. So there's a number that I don't recommend. Starting with the Spider Punk Basic, and you're going to find, I would say, a theme here. Now, this is one I actually considered putting up above because it does a good amount of damage. It really does. It's a high damaging attack, but it's only for one target. So it's like 130% damage to one target. Like, Like, how excited can you get about it? If you find yourself not getting through things, I mean, I could see myself in Doom 3 or Doom 4 doing this one. But for right now, I just don't feel the need at this point in time. It's just, I'm just having no trouble with the nodes. Anyway, same reason why I've really, kept most of my team at Gear Tier 14. I'm having no problem completing the nodes. But this is one that could be in the nice to have category, but it's just like, it's damage to a single target damage. Like, very few of you are going to have the spare T4s to do that. All right, let's go to the next one here. The Miles Special. Now, this is one that I really had to use myself to learn how bad it was. Okay, so the Miles Special, on paper, I'm like, okay, this is super important. I was ready to have this in the essentials because having slow for 2 turns versus 1 turn is very, very important because of the way slow works. So what slow does is it reduces the amount that you gain speed by 50%. However, if you are, let's say the character is about to take a turn, what happens is if you only have slow for 1 turn, they take the turn and then slow falls off and it has almost no impact. But if you have slow for 2 turns, then it slows down the rate of gain for 50%, so it takes them a long time to get their next turn. The thing is, because of how this actually works, you already get slow for 2 turns. If you don't have this T4, it applies slow for 1 turn, then it prolongs all negative effects by 1. So without the T4, you get slow for 2 turns. This gives you slow for 3 turns, which you really don't need. That's like overkill. So this is just like, Like, it's very rare you're going to have a target that you just want to slow down for 3 turns. I think this is a real luxury that I don't think almost anyone needs. I learned it the hard way, so you didn't have to waste your T4s on it, okay? That's why I don't just I don't just dash these off like some people do. All right. Next one here, the Scarlet Basic. If we go here to the Scarlet Basic, I haven't even done this one. It's just pure damage, 40% damage to 3 targets. Doesn't seem worth it to me. Next meh T4 on this is the Spidey Basic. If you go here, it's literally, I mean, some people may like it. I don't see it. So you get 50% damage to 2 targets and then 10% chance to gain invade. So instead of 70, it's 80%. Like, come on. Like, that's really real low value for your T4 there. And then the Spidey Ultimate is the last one on the list. And that's just 60% damage to the target. Like, that's just not worth it. All right, let's talk now about the ISO setup for the team. So as you see here, I have my ISO classes, and I said this from the beginning, with all of them Raider and then Miles as Striker. So why is that? Well, if you look at this team, you'll see that I have my team set up this way. They get additional crit chance from 30% crit chance from Spider Punk. Then they get additional 50% crit damage from Scarlet Spider. And then from this ability, from the Raider, what that means is that they're going to get, here, let's see, they're going to get a total of, here, I'll scroll down, 30% crit chance, 20% crit damage from Raider. And so what this means is this 30% crit chance, they get their crit damage is so much higher because of the passive. This just means a lot more damage. So their crit chance with this, if you look at his at level 3 ISO, you know, his crit damage is 200% and his crit chance is 40, and that's up much higher in raids, right? It's up to like 70-something% of raids. So it's just another 100% damage. 30, you know, it's they get 100% additional damage when they crit, and that additional crit chance from Raider means that, you know, it adds on top of each other. They're critting, I think, 70% of the time in raids. It's just a lot of additional damage. So you want as many of these characters Raider as possible. The only reason I made one Striker is because if you look, Miles clears a bunch of negative, it clears 3 positive effects on the target on his ISO attack. And most of the rest of the ISO attacks are garbage. So the most valuable ISO attack is Miles, because he's going to be clearing positive effects, and you really need buff clear here. So that's why he's the lone striker. Now, I've had some people tell me, like, well, wait, Philosopher, don't you want some of these characters Skirmisher for more focus? And the answer is not yet. And what I mean by not yet is, I understand people saying, like, well, sometimes I get a resist on my Ghost Spider, Spider-Man, whatever. I understand that. And particularly some people are asking me about Spider-Man. Does he have sometimes get resists? Like, not that much. He's got higher focus than SSM. He's got higher focus than anti-venom. So he generally, most of the time they land, even for me at Gear Tier 14. And most players are going to have him at 7 yellow stars. He's super easy to get out of the Blitz store. So for me, I think for most players, this character is going to perform fine. Now, I understand symbiotes do have Scream lowers enemy resistance. And so, yes, you might, for some of you, this might be an issue, but I doubt it. I just haven't seen it. I've asked a lot of other players. They really haven't run into that issue. Obviously, in some point in the future, you're going to have to change some of these characters to Skirmisher, whether it's Doom 3 or 4 or whatever. I will just tell you, somebody who's been raiding in Doom raids for a long time, when I started out with Axemen, I didn't have that many skirmishers in the team. You, over time, as characters get power crept, you need focus so bad that you do that for the 50% additional focus. But I don't see the point of doing that when the team's new. So we'll see whether you have to do it at some point in the future, but for right now, you want all the additional damage. You're giving up a ton of damage by changing to Skirmisher. I just don't see the need for it. So that's why that's my ISO recommendation. I feel pretty strongly about that. And then for positioning, this one's pretty easy. You just want, it doesn't matter much for this team, but mild stealth does break chains, so have the smallest or weakest of your team, and that depends on your stars and gear and all that, and just put Miles next to him to break chains. And then in terms of gear priority, I really think having Ghost Spider is the biggest, is most important, because she's doing all that out of turn damage, and she's the heaviest hitter in general. Scarlet Spider next, and then Miles, Punk, and at the last Spidey. I really think in general, Miles does quite a bit of damage with that ultimate, but I really think that, Spidey is the one you can skimp on a little bit. As long as he stays alive and gives out that turn meter, I don't really think you need him big at all. Okay? So there you go. That is the team. That is the infographic. Infographic is linked below. And please, if you like the work we're doing, there's a lot of effort goes in here, and kudos to Punk, who once again just knocked it out of the park with such an awesome looking infographic. So please, if you like this, smash the like button, subscribe to this channel. If you have comments or questions, put them below, or go to our Discord, which is linked below. You can also go to our Twitch stream, which is linked below. And if you want to support the work we do, please use the link below to buy Amazon coins. They will help you save money with offers in the game, and it does support the work we do.